I'm Gina Hayes, 35 years old, and I will never forget the sting of that family dinner in Hartford. As the clinking of wine glasses faded, my father's voice cut through the air. Useless. You can't even afford a house. My mother smirked, nodding in agreement, while my brother added, Yeah, Gina's still renting that dump. The table erupted in laughter, sharp, cruel like knives piercing my chest. I sat there, my heart pounding, their words searing into me. But I didn't snap. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled cold and quiet, stood up and said, Enjoy your dinner. Then I walked out into the night, leaving behind their mocking voices. What they didn't know was that from that moment on, everything was about to change. A month later, when I came back, their laughter wouldn't sound the same again. If you were in my shoes that night, would you have walked away quietly or fought back? Share your thoughts in the comments. I slumped onto my couch, the silence of my Hartford apartment deafening after last night's venom. My mind drifted back to the sacrifices I'd made for my family, the ones they never acknowledged. 10 years ago, I was 25, fresh out of college, with a finance degree, dreaming of grad school at Yale. But Dad's retail business, a chain of appliance stores, was drowning in debt. They begged me to help. I drained $60,000 from my savings, every cent I'd scraped together from internships and side gigs to keep their company afloat. I gave up Yale, settling for a local job as a financial analyst. They promised to pay me back, but the money never came. Instead, they bought a new SUV and threw lavish parties at their office building, acting like I owed them. Worse, I remembered the sting of betrayal 3 years later. I'd been saving again, planning to invest in a startup idea, a budgeting app for small businesses. I shared the idea with my brother Jonathan, thinking he'd support me. Then I noticed $15,000 missing from my savings account. My bank traced the transfer to Jonathan's account. When I confronted him, he shrugged, saying he needed it for his own startup, a flashy tech venture that tanked in 6 months. I went to Mom and Dad expecting outrage. Instead, Mom said, "He's your brother Gina. Let it go." Dad just nodded, dismissing me like I was overreacting. They'd always favored Jonathan, their golden boy, while I was the invisible one scraping by to clean up their messes. Last night's dinner wasn't the first time they'd hurt me. It was just the loudest. Sitting there, I felt the weight of years of being overlooked, my sacrifices thrown back in my face. I grabbed my phone and dialed Timothy, my boyfriend of 2 years. His voice was steady, grounding me as I poured out the pain: Jonathan's theft, my parents' betrayal, the way they'd laughed at me. "They think I'm nothing," I said, my voice cracking. "But I'm done being their doormat." Timothy listened, then said, "Gina, you're smarter than they know. What's your next move?" His words lit a spark. I wasn't just going to sit here and take it. I needed to know how deep their lies went, how much they were hiding behind their smug facades. I paced my living room, the anger turning into resolve. Their retail business had always been shaky, fancy storefronts masking bad decisions. I'd heard whispers from old coworkers about unpaid suppliers, missed loan payments. If they were in trouble again, I could use it. I could hit them where it hurt most, their precious building, their symbol of success. I didn't know how yet, but I'd find a way to make them regret every word. My hands shook as I thought about Jonathan's smug grin, Mom's dismissive tone, Dad's arrogance. They'd built their lives on my sacrifices, then mocked me for it. No more. I dialed Pamela Gray's number, my fingers steady despite the fire in my chest. Pamela Gray, an old college friend, worked at a Hartford bank and always had a knack for digging up financial dirt. After a quick catch-up, I got to the point. "Pamela, I need a favor. Can you check on my parents' business? Their retail chain, Hayes Appliances. I think they're hiding something." She promised to look into it and call me back. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was crunching numbers at my desk. Pamela's voice was low, urgent. "Gina, it's bad. Your parents took out a $200,000 loan 5 years ago, secured by their office building. It's worth $4 million, but they've missed payments for months. The bank's ready to foreclose." I leaned back, processing. The building on Main Street wasn't just their workplace, it was their home, their pride, the heart of their so-called legacy. Dad always bragged about owning it outright, but now it was a house of cards, ready to collapse. Pamela added, "They've been dodging creditors, delaying suppliers. If they don't pay soon, the bank will auction the property." My mind raced. This was the leverage I needed. Their lies, their arrogance were crumbling, and I could use it against them. I thanked Pamela, promising coffee soon, and hung up, my pulse quickening. The news brought back a sharper memory of Jonathan's betrayal. Years ago, when I'd confronted him about the $15,000 he stole from my account, he laughed it off, saying he deserved it for his big idea. Mom and Dad backed him, telling me to stop making a fuss. That moment had broken something in me, but now it fueled me. They'd built their empire on my sacrifices, then discarded me. The building was their weakness, and I could turn it into my weapon. I didn't know the details yet, but the thought of stripping away their pride felt right. I grabbed a notepad, scribbling questions. Could I outbid the bank? Who could help me pull this off? My years as a financial analyst kicked in, calculating risks, imagining outcomes. Their debt was my opening a crack in their perfect facade I could pry wide open. Pamela's words echoed the banks ready to foreclose. That meant time was short, but it also meant opportunity. I remembered Dad's smug lectures about success, Mom's quiet nods, Jonathan's entitled smirk. They thought they were untouchable, but they were wrong. I'd spent years being invisible, fixing their messes while they took credit. Now I'd make them see me. I opened my contacts, searching for someone who could navigate the legal side of this. My old mentor had mentioned a lawyer in Hartford, sharp and discreet. I stepped into James Reed's office, the sleek glass walls of his Hartford law firm, a stark contrast to my racing thoughts. James Reed, a lawyer recommended by my old mentor, had a reputation for handling complex deals with discretion. I sat across from him, laying out my goal: buy my family's office building before the bank could auction it. "I need to stay anonymous," I said, my voice firm. James nodded, flipping through papers. "We can set up a shell company, call it Riverfront Holdings. It'll mask your identity." He explained the building's market value was $4 million, but the bank, desperate to offload it, would accept $3 million. I had $800,000 saved from years of careful investing. "I'll need a loan for the rest," I told him. James scribbled a name: Brian Coleman, an investor known for backing real estate deals. I called Brian Coleman that afternoon, catching him between meetings. After explaining the situation without mentioning my family's involvement, he agreed to meet. Over coffee at a downtown cafe, Brian, a sharp-eyed investor with a knack for quick profits, grilled me on numbers. $3 million's a steal for that property," he said, leaning forward. "I'll cover $2.2 million through my fund, but I expect a return." I agreed to his terms, a 10% stake in future rental income. Brian's team would handle the loan paperwork, and Riverfront Holdings would be the buyer. I shook his hand, feeling the plan lock into place. Back at James's office, I signed the preliminary contract, my signature steady as Riverfront Holdings took shape. The bank accepted the offer that same day, unaware I was behind it. Driving home, I took a detour past the office building on Main Street. Its lights blazed, music spilling out. Dad, Mom, and Jonathan were hosting another extravagant party, their laughter echoing through the open windows. I slowed my car, watching. Dad raised a glass, toasting their success to a crowd of guests. Mom beamed, her jewelry glinting, while Jonathan worked the room, shaking hands like he owned the place. They had no idea the building, their pride, their home, was slipping through their fingers. I gripped the steering wheel, a quiet thrill running through me. They'd mocked me, dismissed me, but now I held the power. The contract was in motion, and their world was about to crack. I pulled away, my mind sharp with purpose. Their party was a facade, a desperate show to keep up appearances while their debts piled up. I'd spent years being invisible, fixing their mistakes. But now I was rewriting the rules. The building would be mine, and they'd face the consequences of their arrogance. My phone pinged as I parked at my apartment. An email from James Reed confirmed the deal was nearly finalized with closing set for next week. Just days after the deal was sealed, I struck my first blow. I mailed the lease amendment through Riverfront Holdings, doubling the rent on my family's office building from $3,000 to $6,000 a month. Days later, my apartment buzzer screeched, pulling me from my morning coffee. I opened the door to find Dad, Mom, and Jonathan standing there, faces twisted with fury. Dad shoved a crumpled copy of the lease notice in my face. "You're behind this, aren't you?" he bellowed, his voice shaking the small hallway. Mom crossed her arms, glaring. "Only you'd be this petty, Gina." Jonathan stepped forward, pointing. "You're so selfish, sabotaging our business?" I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my expression neutral. Their accusations didn't surprise me, they'd always assumed the worst of me, but I wasn't ready to reveal my hand. I invited them in my voice, calm. "Sit down and explain." Dad paced my cramped living room, ranting about the new rent being impossible to pay. "We're already stretched thin," he snapped. Mom chimed in, her tone sharp. "You know we're struggling. Why won't you help us?" I raised an eyebrow. "Help? Like when I bailed out your business before?" Jonathan scoffed, rolling his eyes. "That was years ago. Get over it." His dismissal lit a spark in me. I leaned forward, staring him down. "Like I should get over the $15,000 you stole from my account." The room went quiet. Mom's eyes darted away, and Dad's jaw tightened. They knew what Jonathan had done, but they'd never admitted it. I stood, my voice steady. "I'm not your bank anymore. Figure it out yourselves." Dad's face reddened. "You're an ungrateful brat," he shouted. Mom tried a softer tack, her voice trembling. "Gina, we're family. Please." I shook my head, pointing to the door. "Leave. Now." They stormed out, Jonathan muttering threats under his breath. Hours later, my phone lit up with notifications. Jonathan had posted on Facebook a scathing rant calling me an ungrateful sister who turned her back on family. Mom shared it, adding, "Some people forget where they came from." Dad piled on, labeling me selfish and spiteful. Their friends chimed in, flooding the comments with insults. I scrolled through, my stomach tight, but my resolve firm. They thought they could shame me into submission, but they were wrong. Their public attack only sharpened my focus. I'd spent years swallowing their disrespect, but now I held the upper hand. The building was mine, and they'd soon learn what that meant. Their posts were a desperate move, a last-ditch effort to paint me as the villain. But I wasn't playing their game anymore. I shut my phone off, my mind already on the next step. Their company's grand reopening was days away, a splashy event to impress investors. I'd be there, ready to turn their world upside down. I pulled out my black dress, laying it out for the party. And then the fateful night finally arrived. I walked into the grand reopening of my family's retail business, my heels clicking on the polished floor of their Main Street office building. The room buzzed with investors, local business owners, and city officials, all gathered to celebrate Hayes Appliances' supposed comeback. Chandeliers glowed overhead, waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne, and a string quartet played softly. Dad stood at the center, shaking hands, his smile wide as he pitched their new vision. Mom chatted with guests, her elegant dress catching the light. Jonathan worked the room, charming potential investors with his usual swagger. They thought this night would save their sinking ship, but I was here to sink it for good. I waited until Dad raised a glass for a toast, his voice booming with confidence. To new beginnings, he declared, the crowd clapping. I stepped forward, my black dress sharp against the festive mood, and cleared my throat. The room quieted, eyes turning to me. "I have an announcement," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the chatter. "I'm Gina Hayes, and through Riverfront Holdings, I own this building." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dad's glass froze midair. Mom's smile vanished, and Jonathan's face went pale. I held up the lease agreement, letting the moment sink in. "You haven't paid the new rent, $6,000 a month. You're in default. I'm evicting you. Leave tonight." The silence was deafening. Dad stammered. Gina, what are you doing? I turned to the crowd. My gaze locked on him. David. You and Cynthia built this business on my sacrifices, then called me useless. Jonathan, you stole $15,000 from my account to fund your failed startup. I faced the stunned guests. They covered for him, told me to let it go. But I don't forget betrayal. Cynthia's hands trembled, her eyes darting to the investors who whispered among themselves. Jonathan lunged forward, his voice low. You're lying. But the crowd's murmurs grew louder, their trust in him crumbling. David tried to speak, his face red, but no words came. They were exposed, their facade shattered before the very people they needed to impress. I stood tall, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. Years of their dismissal, their lies had led to this moment. The investors stepped back, some heading for the door, their confidence in Hayes Appliances gone. I pointed to the exit. Get out. All of you. They didn't move at first, frozen in shock, but the weight of the truth pressed down. Cynthia grabbed David's arm, her voice a whisper. We can't fight this. They shuffled out, Jonathan trailing his head low. The crowd parted, watching their downfall in stunned silence. I turned and walked away, leaving the building behind. 3 months later. Without investors, their retail business collapsed under the weight of unpaid debts. The bank seized their remaining assets, forcing them out of the Main Street office building I now owned. I heard through a former co-worker that they'd moved to a modest one-bedroom apartment in East Hartford, renting for $1,200 a month. David took a job as a warehouse supervisor, his pride buried under long shifts. Cynthia sold her jewelry to cover bills her days of lavish parties over. Jonathan, stripped of his startup dreams, worked odd jobs, his charm useless without his family's backing. They never contacted me, their silence a bitter acknowledgement of their defeat. Meanwhile, I stood in a small Hartford park surrounded by close friends and soft sunlight, marrying Timothy. Our ceremony was simple, just a white tent, wildflowers, and vows we wrote ourselves. Timothy's steady hand held mine as we promised to build a life together, one rooted in trust, not betrayal. I wore a plain dress, no need for flash, and felt lighter than I had in years. The building's rental income steady at $20,000 a month after the new leases gave me freedom I'd never known. I paid off Brian Coleman's loan early, securing full ownership. The victory wasn't just financial, it was personal. I'd taken back my power from those who'd tried to break me. With that power, I wanted to give back. I founded the Rising Roots Fund, using the building's profits to support people overlooked or dismissed by their families or communities. I set up an office in the building, once my family's pride, now a symbol of my strength. Applications poured in, stories of single mothers, young entrepreneurs, and students who'd been told they weren't enough. I read each one, moved by their resilience, and approved grants for job training, small business loans, and scholarships. The fund's first event, a community fair, drew hundreds, their gratitude humbling me. I'd turned my pain into something meaningful, a legacy that outshone the one David, Cynthia, and Jonathan had tried to claim. My life felt full, not with vengeance, but with purpose. Timothy and I planned a quiet future, maybe a house outside Hartford, maybe kids someday. The scars from my family's betrayal lingered, but they no longer defined me. I'd built something better, something mine. I sat by the window of my Hartford apartment, watching the city hum below, reflecting on the journey that brought me here. The scars from my family's betrayal didn't vanish, but they no longer held me captive. I learned a hard truth: my worth wasn't tied to their approval or anyone else's. My parents and Jonathan built their lives on lies, dismissing me as worthless while hiding their own failures. Their betrayal, treating me as a tool, then casting me aside, taught me that family isn't defined by blood, but by respect. Their downfall wasn't my vengeance. It was the natural consequence of their choices. I'd spent years chasing their validation, but now I stood firm in my own value, free from their shadow. One afternoon, Carol Morgan, my neighbor, stopped by with a plate of cookies and news. I saw Cynthia at the grocery store. Carol said, her voice low. She looked tired, carrying cheap canned goods. They're struggling out in East Hartford. I nodded, stirring my tea, unsurprised. David's warehouse job barely covered their rent, and Jonathan's odd jobs offered no stability. Carol added, "They don't talk about you anymore." I thanked her for the update, but their hardship didn't spark pity or guilt. They'd chosen to undermine me to protect their pride over truth. I'd offered them chances to change, but they refused. Now they lived with the results while I moved forward. Choosing not to reconcile was my final act of freedom. I could have reached out, offered help, or softened the blow, but that would mean stepping back into their cycle of manipulation. Instead, I closed that door, locking it for good. My life with Timothy, my work with the Rising Roots Fund, and the community I'd built were enough. I didn't need their apologies or their presence to feel whole. The pain they caused had forged me, not broken me. I'd turned their dismissal into strength, their betrayal into purpose. My story wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming myself. To everyone listening, I want to say thank you. Your support, your stories have reminded me I'm not alone. If you're out there feeling small or overlooked, know this. Your worth isn't defined by those who can't see it. Stand up, hold fast, and build your own path. You are enough. I learned that the hard way, but I'm stronger for it. So are you.